but I think I've underperformed for.
One question, that's all it took. A reporter asked Novak Djokovic something he called disrespectful. And instead of deflecting, instead of giving a diplomatic non-answer like players usually do in these moments, Djokovic looked the room dead in the eye and fired back with 4 words that are now spreading across every corner of the tennis world. I'm not chasing anyone. Stick around because the full context behind that answer is a lot more loaded than it sounds on the surface. And it might tell us more about where Djokovic's head is right now than anything he's said in months. Let's set the scene because context is everything here. Novak Djokovic, 39 years old, 24 Grand Slam titles, a career that has spent the better part of 2 decades rewriting what's possible in this sport. But lately, every single press conference he walks into carries a different undertone than it used to. It's not about his last match anymore. It's not really about his next tournament either. It's about the number hanging over every question, 24 majors, and the ghost of a 25th that keeps slipping further out of reach every time a younger player stands in his way. So when Djokovic sat down in front of the media this week, everyone in that room already knew where the questions were heading. And one journalist decided to ask it directly. The kind of question that pokes right at the sorest part of a legend's career, the part where age and ambition start pulling in opposite directions. Djokovic didn't dodge it. He didn't smile it away like he's done 100 times before. He pushed back, hard. And the 4 words he used to do it are the reason we're making this video right now. Here's what actually happened in that room. A reporter, framing a question around Djokovic's ongoing chase for a record-extending 25th Grand Slam, asked him something along the lines of whether he felt like he was running out of time to catch the milestones still ahead of him, essentially asking Djokovic, to his face, whether the clock has finally become his biggest opponent. For most players, that's an uncomfortable question to answer diplomatically. For Djokovic, at 39, after just watching a semifinal slip away from him at Wimbledon, it clearly landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. He called the framing of the question disrespectful, not the topic itself, the framing, the insinuation buried inside it, the idea that his career should be measured purely by a countdown clock, rather than by what he's still doing on the court right now, week after week, at an age when most legends have long since retired. And that's when he said it. I'm not chasing anyone. 4 words. But listen to how loaded that sentence actually is. He's not saying he's chasing Federer's Wimbledon record. He's not saying he's chasing a 25th major just to pad a stat sheet. He's saying, flatly, that the entire premise of the question is wrong. That he's not out here running after ghosts or numbers or other people's legacies. He's simply playing tennis on his own terms, for as long as his body allows him to. And if the results come, they come. If the records fall, they fall. But he's not going to let a press room reduce 20 years of his career down to a countdown. According to those in the room, there was a noticeable shift in tone the second he said it. Not hostility exactly, but a kind of stunned silence, the sort that happens when a legend stops giving a rehearsed answer and actually says what he's thinking. Because for a player as media-trained and controlled as Djokovic usually is, that kind of unfiltered pushback doesn't happen often. And when it does, people notice. Here's why this specific answer landed so differently than it would have a few years ago. Timing. This didn't happen after a routine second-round win in February. This happened days after Djokovic walked off center court at Wimbledon, beaten by Jannik Sinner in the semifinals, in a tournament where he'd already fought a 5-hour battle against Felix Auger-Aliassime just to get that far. Days after he told the press he hopes to play at least one more Wimbledon, a sentence we broke down on this very channel because of how uncharacteristically uncertain it sounded coming from him. So when a reporter follows that up almost immediately with a question about whether time is running out on his career, it's not landing in a vacuum. It's landing on a player who's already been fielding retirement questions nonstop for 2 straight weeks. At some point, even the most composed athlete in the world reaches a limit. And here's the part that makes his frustration at least somewhat understandable. Since his last Grand Slam title at the 2023 US Open, Djokovic has lost 6 major semifinals, 4 of those to Sinner alone. He's 15 years older than the man who's now beating him at the biggest moments, on the biggest stages, over and over again. That's a brutal set of numbers to be reminded of constantly, especially when you're a competitor who has spent literally 2 decades being the one asking the questions of everyone else, the one setting the records, not chasing them. And that's really what he pushed back on, because chasing implies desperation. It implies falling behind and scrambling to catch up. Djokovic's entire response was built around rejecting that framing entirely, insisting that whatever happens with the record books from here, it's not going to be because he was chasing anyone else's shadow. Whether you buy that distinction or not, one thing is clear. This wasn't a scripted answer. This was Djokovic, unfiltered, pushing back on a narrative that's been building around him for months. The moment that clip hit social media, it spread fast, and the reaction split almost instantly into 2 very different camps. One side loved it. Fans called it vintage Djokovic, the same fire, the same refusal to be boxed in by a narrative. That's defined his entire career against a public that's often favored Federer and Nadal over him. They pointed out that this is exactly the mentality that's kept him competing at the top of the sport, well past the age most legends walk away. If he sounds defiant, they argued, that's because defiance has always been his superpower. The other side read it completely differently. Some fans and pundits suggested the sharpness of his response was actually proof of exactly how much this subject is getting under his skin, that a truly relaxed, at-peace veteran wouldn't need to snap back at a reasonably framed question about his own timeline. To them, the intensity of the answer said more than the answer itself. Tennis journalists picked the story up almost immediately, and it quickly became one of the most talked-about sound bites of the entire post-Wimbledon news cycle. Multiple outlets ran the quote as a standalone headline, stripped of context, which only added fuel to how it was being interpreted online. Some columnists framed it as an inspiring show of competitive fire from a 39-year-old refusing to be counted out. Others framed it as a warning sign, a champion who might be more rattled by his own mortality in this sport than he's willing to admit publicly. And this is where it gets even more interesting, because just days after this exchange, a completely different story broke about Djokovic, one that paints an almost contradictory picture. Reports emerged that after his semi-final loss to Sinner, Djokovic walked into the gym and personally congratulated Sinner's entire team, not just Sinner himself. Think about how these 2 moments sit next to each other. In one, Djokovic sharply rejects any suggestion that his career is winding down under pressure. In the other, he's calmly, generously acknowledging the team that just ended his tournament. The kind of gracious gesture that doesn't come from someone spiraling under the weight of a fading career. Maybe both things can be true at once. A competitor who still burns with fire when questioned publicly, but who's also made peace privately with exactly where he stands in this new era of the sport. Let's take the skeptical read seriously for a moment, because it's not an unreasonable one. Athletes at the tail end of legendary careers have a long, well-documented history of insisting they're fine right up until the moment they're not. It's part of what makes them great in the first place, an almost irrational refusal to accept decline. But that same trait can also blind a competitor to what everyone around them can see clearly. 6 lost major semifinals since his last title, 4 of them to one specific opponent, 15 years his junior. A body that needed 5 hours just to survive one match at Wimbledon before folding 2 days later. From that angle, "I'm not chasing anyone" doesn't sound like peace. It sounds like a wall going up. A refusal to engage honestly with a question that, however bluntly worded, isn't actually unfair to ask a 39-year-old competing against the best player in the world. But here's the other side, and it's just as compelling when you actually look at his full body of language around this topic. Djokovic didn't say he's not aware of the numbers. He didn't deny that time is a factor. What he specifically rejected was the framing of desperation. The idea that he's out there scrambling after a record for its own sake. That's a distinction worth taking seriously from a player who has historically been remarkably self-aware about his own game and his own mortality in this sport. Combine that with the gym story, a champion secure enough in himself to walk over and genuinely congratulate the team that just beat him. And you get a picture of someone who isn't in denial at all. Someone who has simply drawn a hard line between accepting reality and being reduced to a countdown clock by other people's narratives. So here's the real question. Is Novak Djokovic's fire right now proof that he's still fully capable of chasing down history? Or is it the sound of a legend fighting a narrative he privately knows is starting to become true? Because the answer to that question isn't going to come from a press conference. It's going to come from whatever happens the next time he steps onto a Grand Slam court against Sinner, Alcaraz, or whoever else stands in his way. So where does this actually leave Novak Djokovic? 4 words. I'm not chasing anyone. Said in a press room to a question he found disrespectful in a moment that's now been dissected from every possible angle by fans, journalists, and rivals alike. And somehow, both sides of this debate have a real case. Maybe this really is the same defiant fire that's carried him through 2 decades of being doubted, dismissed, and counted out, only to keep proving everyone wrong anyway. Or maybe it's the sound of a legend drawing a line in the sand precisely because the ground underneath him is starting to shift. The gym moment with Sinner's team suggests a man at peace. The sharpness of this answer suggests a man who's anything but. What we do know is this: Djokovic hasn't retired. He hasn't set a final date. He hasn't given anyone a clean answer about how many chapters are actually left. All he's given us is a single, unfiltered sentence that's now become the center of the biggest debate in tennis this week. And whether he's chasing anyone or not, the entire sport is still chasing him for an answer. So here's what we want to know from you. Do you think Djokovic's response was vintage fire from a champion who refuses to be counted out? Or a sign that these retirement questions are finally starting to get under his skin? Drop your take in the comments, because this debate has been split right down the middle everywhere else online, and we want to see where our audience lands. If you think Djokovic still has at least one more Grand Slam run in him, smash that like button. If you think this response was more defensive than confident, let us know why down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, go check out our breakdown of Djokovic's "I hope" comment from right after his Wimbledon semifinal loss. These 2 moments, side by side, tell a much bigger story than either one does alone. And if you don't want to miss the next chapter of this story, because you know exactly how much scrutiny every single one of Djokovic's answers is going to get from here on out, make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell turned on. Thanks for watching. This has been Tennis Next Point, and we'll see you in the next one.